There was a time when I did not think it was possible to have a profitable photography or creative service-based business. I am happy to report back that that is now not true. This is an old, outdated thought from many years ago, but has now been the driving purpose for me to start this podcast. So with that, welcome to the Profitable Creatives podcast, where passion meets profitability. I am your host, Emily Kim, and if you are a creative entrepreneur dreaming of building a business that is as fulfilling as it is profitable, you are in the right place. In this episode, I want to break down my story and how I got from almost a hopeless creative to now a confident and growing in confidence still. I haven't reached this peak level of confidence, but how I turned from a hopeless and sad entrepreneur into an excited and confident entrepreneur in my brand photography business. So in the rest of this episode, we're going to go over my story, the purpose of this podcast, and what you can expect to hear in future episodes. So my entrepreneurial journey, well, this part of it at least, begins around 2018, which is when I officially registered my photography business. I started it by taking graduation portraits for graduating college seniors because at the time I was wrapping up my MBA at the University of Alabama in Roll Tide, and to help pay for tuition that year, I took graduation portraits. It was a lot of fun, and then I ended up landing my dream job out of college as a software engineer at Apple. Some backstory on that. I got my undergrad degree in computer science. I stayed to finish my MBA. So getting this job as a software engineer at Apple right out of college, especially going to Alabama, it was a dream come true, and it seemed very unfathomable for this to happen to me because, some context, these big tech companies, they don't recruit really out of Alabama, so you have to do a lot of hustling to make that happen, which I did. Story for another time, but there was a lot of hustling going on. So that's a little bit of context. I got the job. My husband, then boyfriend, also got a job in California, and we packed up our bags and headed out there. Now, in California, in the Bay Area, there are lots of other colleges around. There's Stanford, Santa Clara University, San Jose State. So I kind of just kept doing photography on the side because it was fun, and I can't really sit still. So that is how I started my business out in California. Now, things are going great. 2018, 2019, I'm working my job. I am taking photos on the side. But what happened was I stumbled into a local photography community, shout out Better Together San Jose, of photographers, a lot of them full-time photographers who met monthly. And the more and more I hung out with them, the more I realized, oh, I didn't even know that being a full-time photographer could be a thing. It was not something I had ever considered. It was not something I had ever been exposed to. So meeting this group of successful and excited and knowledgeable photographers was so eye-opening to me. Like I said, we met monthly, so I really got to know this group of people, and being a full-time corporate software engineer, I thought, maybe I can start my wedding photography business, and that is how I can make my pivot into full-time photography. Because now at this time, I was like, okay, being a full-time photographer is some very far in the future, distant dream. Maybe 10 or 15 years from now, when I'm quote-unquote done with software engineering, I will become a full-time photographer. That's what I thought at the time. So I started spending my weekends assisting some of these photographers, second shooting, third shooting, and very quickly realized that wedding photography was not for me. I have so much love and respect for all you wedding photographers out there because I just can't handle that kind of stress. I just can't do it, but I commend those that can. So I ruled out wedding photography, but I knew I still loved taking photos, and eventually I landed in this lifestyle space. There are a lot of bloggers and influencers in the Bay Area. I ended up finding this niche of taking lifestyle photos for people's Instagrams, for their blogs, and I really, really liked it. It was a lot of fun. It was really creative. I loved that people brought really cool outfits, and we always wanted to go to different places. So it was a very creative exercise for me. And through doing that, I ended up finding my very first brand photography client, or rather, she found me on Instagram. She's a jewelry designer. She's super awesome. And when I photographed her session, I realized, wait a minute, I like this. I really love taking photos of business owners for their business. It was a really perfect combination of all of my skills and interests because, like I said, I got my MBA. I've always been entrepreneurial. If we rewind back to when I was in high school, I actually ran an Etsy store where I would make and sell polymer clay charms. There were lots of little fan art kind of thing. I would take commissions. So I've always been entrepreneurial at heart. And when I realized that I could do this for other business owners, everything just kind of clicked. So I said, okay, this is great. I'll niche into brand photography and I'll keep going. Well, the first couple of years in business were not very financially successful for me. I will do a whole deep dive episode on this later. But long story short, my very first year in business, I only made, I netted $5,000 after expenses and everything. And then the next year, I worked twice as hard, had twice as many sessions, actually way more than that, and then netted like $14,000 or $15,000. So as someone who was like, okay, how the heck am I going to ever turn this into a full-time business so that I can quit my job? At this rate, this is literally never going to happen. I can't live off of $15,000 a year working as much as I am and have this be a full-time job, right? So it was a very confusing and a little bit of a hopeless situation for me because I didn't really understand the path. I couldn't see how I could make this work for myself on the current trajectory that I was on. So what changed? A couple of things. At the end of 2019, that was the very first time that I worked with a business mentor. Actually, maybe it was beginning of 2020, January. I don't remember. But I hired a business mentor. We had a 2-hour consultation call, and I just bombarded her with questions. I was like, how do I run a sales call? How do I market myself? How do I price myself? All of these things. And what she did for me, I am so forever grateful that I worked with her and I invested in myself. But she was able to help me get out of my own way because I had a lot of limiting beliefs of like, oh, you can't make money as a photographer. I had a lot of that going on. We will do another deep dive episode into this and how to undo it if you have any of it. But she helped me cut through a lot of that. And she also helped me realize things that I already knew, right? I have my MBA. Does that translate one-to-one to running a solo entrepreneur business? Not necessarily, but there are some skills that I had and knowledge that I had that I was not applying to myself because of said limiting beliefs. So she helped me cut through all of that. I ended up doubling down on certain marketing channels. I really started taking myself seriously. I got systems in place. All of these will be deep dive episodes later. But that combined with what happened in 2020 ended up really skyrocketing my business. So I know I say 2020 and everybody internally cringes. But if you think about it, when March of 2020 hit, all of these entrepreneurs, all of a sudden, you had to be online. If you weren't before, you had to be. There was no other option. You needed a website. You needed an Instagram. Everything was pivoting to virtual. So when that happened, the number of inquiries that I got for personal brand photography surged because everybody needed it all of a sudden. Brand photography has been a growing niche since then and even a little bit before then. So it was a combination of a lot of things. That whole situation combined with the internal work that I was doing on myself and my business really helped me step up to the next level that I needed to operate at to make this a full-time business. So like I said, I will do a deep dive of the progression of the amount of money that I made and how it happened in the next, I think it's the next episode. But fast forward, middle of 2021, I end up quitting my full-time job as a software engineer and running my business full-time. Not only did I do that, but I also ended up signing a lease on a commercial space to open my studio. It's called the Sunlight Space. It is no longer my studio. I have sold it, but it still holds a very special place in my heart. So that is my story. Now, I didn't just quit on a whim. It is something that I had been thinking about for so long. When I was working with this mentor, I told her yeah, I'll quit in 2025. I quit in 2021, so it obviously was accelerated. But what was happening to me in my full-time job was I realized that my life goals and how I wanted to live my life was no longer aligned with what this job could provide me. And sometimes I feel really guilty saying that because it was an amazing, amazing job. And I am so grateful to have had the opportunity to work at the biggest company in the world. It was an absolute dream. But what I wanted was a successful career and also the time and flexibility to raise a family on my terms. And working a 9-to-5 corporate job was not compatible with that lifestyle that I wanted for myself. There was no way, at least for me, the way that I wanted to raise a family and the way that I wanted to live my life and also have a successful career, I couldn't see that path anymore as a software engineer. And also, I've learned this now after a lot of reflection, working in corporate really brings out the worst in my personality. It makes me competitive and it makes me stressed and I hustle and it's just not great. I operate a lot better working for myself because I can give myself that flexibility. And there's a lot of other things that go into it. But to make more money as a corporate person, to climb the corporate ladder, to be where I wanted to be in corporate, required too many hours and too much of my time that I wanted to spend with my future family. So that is the driver of why I ended up leaving my corporate job. And it also wasn't this like instant decision. It feels like it. When I say it, it feels like it, right? Because all of a sudden, this studio lease landed on my lap and then I quit my job and it was a whole thing. But I'd been thinking about this for a really long time. The next episode, I'll go over how this happened. But when I quit my job, I was not making the amount of money that I needed to replace my corporate income at the time. I had just reached the point where I could no longer increase my business revenue with the amount of time that I had. I was using 100% of my free time working on my business as a side hustle, and I just couldn't do both anymore. So they came to a head and everything kind of just happened all at once. And that is how I ended up here. I think the significant turning point in this whole story is the shifts over time that I took to remove those limiting beliefs of, you can't be successful as a photographer. You must be crazy to leave your software engineering job to run a photography business. Because to the people that I was surrounding myself with in my corporate job, like, yeah, that sounds crazy. I went to college for computer science. I got my MBA. I was good at my job, right? I was on the clear path to be a manager and like do all of these corporate things. But it just wasn't what I wanted. And for the longest time, I didn't think it was possible because I had my selective hearing turned on and I thought they were right. It wasn't until I surrounded myself with other full-time photographers that I realized this was possible for me. So what I want this podcast to be is that group or that community. I mean, it's just me talking right now, but I'll have other guests on, of people that believe in you and that tell you, hey, look, this is possible. Just because you don't see anyone doing it in your area or because you don't have any evidence in your own personal life, we're here. It's real. It can happen for you if you have the right community. So that's what I want the Profitable Creatives podcast to be for you. I want to talk about these things that nobody talks about. In my next episode, I'm going to give you literally an overview of my profit and loss statement so you can see the journey and how it was not an easy decision for me to quit my job. But I want to talk about the reality of it. I want to talk about the difficulties, but also the joy that it brings. So in future episodes, what you can expect are solo episodes like this from me, where I am talking about a little bit about my journey or more tactical stuff. If you follow me in other places or you watch my YouTube channel, you know that I am a very practical person. I like to provide practical, tactical advice. So that's part of what you'll see on this podcast. But also, I want to bring on guests so that you can have different perspectives from my own. I think that's really important to grow as not only an entrepreneur, but as a person, to hear different perspectives and hear about how different people are running their businesses and see, okay, what can I take for myself and what can I leave? So I want the Profitable Creatives podcast to be a place where you can learn different perspectives, different strategies, things like that. Now, the last thing that I want to leave you with are two of my big philosophies that you will hear me say throughout this podcast, probably in like every episode. But the first is adopting the mindset of iteration over perfection. You've probably heard the phrase progress over perfection. I am personally not a huge fan of that phrase because progress is very nebulous. What does progress mean? Progress could mean I got out of bed this morning. Progress could mean I scheduled out like 50 different Instagram posts. Like, what is progress? Iteration, however, has a definition. Iteration is doing something. You are making incremental changes. I will get into this again in a future episode, but I want you to start just noodling on that. I talk about it all the time. I say it all the time. I have to remind myself of it all the time. But think about iteration over perfection so that we can start dismantling that perfectionist mindset if you have it. So that's one thing I want to leave you with. The second thing is a little bit of a callback to my background. Hear me out, okay? I'm going to say it. You might not like it, but just hear me out. Have an open mind. Your business needs you to be both an artist and an engineer. I am not saying that you have to go out and learn how to write code or learn how to build bridges, but what I mean by that phrase is even though we are artists, we're creatives, right? Our art is our work. We also need to adopt the mindset that engineers have. And that is one of the keys to running a successful business. Engineers have a problem-solving mindset. They iterate. They don't just, draft up this beautiful architectural diagram of a bridge and go build it and be like, okay, like send a truck out on it. Like, no, that is not how we engineers operate, or you should operate. We come up with the idea, make incremental changes, and then move forward. Adopting a problem-solving mindset and thinking things like, okay, I just launched mini sessions, nobody bought it. Well, that's unfortunate, but what can I take away from this and how can I iterate on this and make incremental changes so that next time it's 10% better? That's the mindset that I really want us to adopt as you listen to future episodes, because I'm going to be talking about it a lot. It's okay if you're like, Emily, I still don't really get it. I promise if you are a creative entrepreneur or service provider, so a photographer, copywriter, designer, makeup artist, who is ready to make your business the best that it can be and make it fit into your life on your terms in your own way. I'm not here to tell you exactly how to run your business. Adopting the engineering mindset will show you how you can take the tactics and strategies that you hear on this podcast and apply it to your own business. Now, if you have any questions, thoughts, suggestions, there are two places that you can find me. The first is on Instagram at emilykim.co, so emilykim.co. And then also the Facebook group. I have a free Facebook group called Profitable Creatives. If you go search it, you'll find it. It'll also be in the show notes. That is going to be the home base for this podcast. So if you have any questions about episodes, if you have episode requests, head over there. I manually accept people, so you might not get in right away. I don't automate it because I like to look at, everybody that's coming in. So it might take a couple of days for you to get access, but that is where you can go. Everything is in the show notes. And with that, I will see you in the next episode, which, like I said, will be about what it costs to run my brand photography business and my own revenue and income journey from when I first started my business to what it looks like now. All right, I will see you in the next episode of the Profitable Creatives Podcast.